Gigantic.
It is October 9th, 2023, and this is Gigantic Pop number 6. I'm Glenn Rubenstein, joined by Raj Giri. And look, here's the deal. We're pretty convinced Matt Morgan fell asleep. It's 11:25 on the East Coast as we're recording this week. Matt had something last night, Sunday. We said we're going to push it to Monday. We'll do it after Raw. Funny we're doing it after Raw. We're not talking about Raw, but it feels so retro. It's a Monday night. Raj has had a couple of drinks. And maybe Matt Morgan, we said watch Nightmare on Elm Street and, hope Freddy Krueger doesn't get him.
I did not get a chance to finish Friday the 13th, but man, Nightmare on Elm Street, watched it again. Great. Such a great movie. Still holds up.
The first one's phenomenal. And I think the context of this is important. So this week it's October. We're doing Halloween, folks. We're talking about scary movies this month, scary pop culture moments, things that burned and imprinted within us that left a lasting mark, as great pop culture often does. And do you remember as a kid when you first heard about horror movies or slasher films or, people talking about, I remember vivid memories on the playground. You would have the one kid that saw something like Halloween that, his older brother showed him and he'd be like, oh, it was really scary, man. It was like Michael Myers. Like it was almost like urban legend, these movies before we even saw them.
Well, excuse me. Well, I felt like a lot of those movies, like the old school horror movies, were those moments that they captured, like Nightmare on Elm Street, where you had the 1, 2, Freddy's coming, and The Shining with the hallway. You see the blood, and like they just captured those moments that you will never forget.
Yeah,
and I feel like you don't see those kind of moments or scenes today, where it's just that there's like 3 moments in a movie that you'll just never forget. And they captured those. And I thought The Shining, Nightmare on Elm Street, they got those. And
iconic, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what I remember? I don't know, because I watched a lot of TV as a child, as a parent to anyone that's ever listened to me talk. And it was the TV commercials. The first one I remember was for Jaws 2. I remember like in a room alone, maybe I was 3 or 4 years old, and hearing the just when you thought it was safe to go back in the water. And that creepy voice, that great voice in those trailers.
Dun, dun.
Yeah. And then I remember with Friday the 13th, 3D, seeing Jason, and they were showing, all the stuff coming at the camera. I was aware of that. But then Nightmare on Elm Street, I remember seeing the trailer for, it wasn't even the first one. It was part 2, Freddy's Revenge. And they would show like those little, on late night on UHF stations, they would show those behind the scenes, not behind the scenes, but those little electronic press kits, extended previews for movies. And I remember seeing one for Freddy's Revenge. And I remember being freaked out because there I am on a Friday or Saturday night watching late night TV, flipping the channels, staying up to 1 a.m, seeing that, being scared. And I was thinking about that. And, that's not a uniquely 80s experience. They still do it today. I remember last year when Evil Dead Rise came out, the trailers for that on TV, I was like, fuck this. This is some scary shit. Like, don't show me this on TV when I'm trying to enjoy SmackDown. Like, this is creeping me out, man.
Well, but what other scenes have been as iconic as those? Like again with the Nightmare on Elm Street, with the especially The Shining. The Shining with the blood in the hallway.
The Exorcist. Now we got the new Exorcist out, but the original in fact, I had the original Exorcist ruined for me. I did not watch the original Exorcist until like 2008. And my entire life, I saw the Exorcist parodied and made fun of so much with the head spinning and the pea soup vomit and all the possession scenes. And when I finally saw The Exorcist, I was like, I just can't take this seriously as a scary movie. Because it was so overdone. But no, I think there's a lot with horror. And in fact, with horror, I think the reason why as a genre, it's so easy to talk about and it has such inherent virality amongst kids, especially, is everybody talks about the different kills. So in Nightmare on Elm Street, I would hear be like, oh, her body's dragged all around the room and it's really scary and you can't see Freddy. and the body's moving. I mean, they would talk about Johnny Depp getting sucked in the bed and the gusher of blood coming out. In Friday the 13th, I mean, pick a kill, like everyone was discussing it on the schoolyard. So there'd be Jaws, like, but that's like, as a kid, there was almost that lore of a horror movie. There was watching it, but then there was the way people talked about it. And I think that before people were drinking or doing drugs or even smoking, like that was kind of the early childhood badass thing, is you'd have the kid to be like, I rented Faces of Death this weekend, and be like, oh man, like he's hardcore. I can't watch that. Those are real death scenes, man. Like you're messed up,
Yeah, it was. I remember watching Faces of Death back in the day, which was. It felt like it was watching. It felt like you were watching porn with that, right? Like it was just.
It was forbidden. It'd be banned in 37 countries. Faces of Death.
But you're seeing people actually die.
Well, in some cases, apparently a lot of it was staged. Dude, I used to get freaked out at the video store just sometimes looking at the box covers of things.
Yeah.
I remember the box cover for the original Sleepaway Camp that is a knife through a bloody sneaker, but then on the back, it's a kid writing a letter home, and it's all handwriting saying what's going on. And at the end, the kid writes like, I hear somebody coming, and then you just see blood all over the bottom of the page. And I was like, like, I can't watch this movie. I'm terrified by the box cover.
Well, horror movies. I actually was not a big horror movie fan back in the day.
Yeah.
I love The Shining. The Shining, to this day, I find that to be the greatest horror movie of all time. Nightmare on Elm Street 1, great. I never a Friday the 13th fan. I was watching it for this show, and watching it, I was just like, oh yeah, it's a really bad movie. And like the number of really good horror movies, I think I've got like 8.
There's 8 horror movies that are
8.
great. Period.
Yeah.
Wow.
Shining, Nightmare on Elm Street, Joyride. Have you seen Joyride?
With Paul Walker.
Yes, it's great. It's
not the more recent comedy about the girls that go to China, which is also a very good film.
No, the one with Paul Walker. It's actually great.
Wait, hold on a second. On your list of the 8, okay, so wait, give me the entire list of the 8 horror films, the 8 great horror films of all time. Okay, start again.
I gave you 3 so far, right?
Okay.
Psycho.
Psycho.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh gosh, that might be.
Okay, so Raj is Monday Night Raj. Raj's thing. There are 8 great horror movies: The Shining, Nightmare on Elm Street, Joyride with Paul Walker, Psycho, and I can't remember the other 4.
Yeah. Oh shit! Yeah, I think that's it.
That's phenomenal. I think there's more than 8.
What else you got?
Okay, more recently, Hereditary was.
Never heard of it.
Dude, Hereditary will freak you out. Hereditary is a freakish film. It is very unpredictable. I think now horror comedy is really more the trend as of late. And horror movies have always had humor, but I just watched, actually, you would like this. There's something on Amazon called Totally Killer, and it's about a girl traveling back to 1987 to stop a killer from killing like her mom's friends in high school. And it's very referential. They mention Back to the Future, but it's a slasher time travel comedy. It just came out last week. I was smiling the entire time I watched it. It was a very fun adventure movie, but it was a horror movie still. It had some slasher stuff. But no, recently I think Barbarian was very good with Justin Long.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, that was that's good scares in it, but it depends though on what type of horror you're looking for, because there are different types, right? There's the slasher film, there's the monster movie, there's psychological horror. I mean, The Shining is kind of slow in many parts.
It is, but it is it leaves those lasting impressions, which I feel like a lot of movies don't do anymore.
I agree with that. I mean, look, here's my take on a good horror movie. I thought the recent It parts 1 and 2 were very good.
I thought 1 was good. 2 sucked.
Here's what's a great horror movie is if you wake up in the middle of the night and you're lying in bed, you can't sleep, and you
Yeah.
think of that movie, and you just pull the covers a little tighter, and you
Mhm.
just try and change the subject. If a movie leaves that kind of lasting mark where it freaks you out in the middle of the night just to think about it,
Yeah.
that's a great horror movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
To this day, I still cannot sleep with the blankets off of my feet dangling off the bed because a shark will get them.
Yeah.
I've felt that
Yeah.
way my entire life.
All right.
Um,
On in the chat,
yes,
what happened on Raw tonight? Let us know because
I heard
uh,
there was a tag team match with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens against
was there
Cody and Jay.
6,000 weeks of a tag match with Sammy, Cody versus uh,
Dude, the bigger story though is tomorrow night. I mean, NXT is pulling out all the stops because they're going head to head with AEW Dynamite on a Tuesday. It's going to be Title Tuesday on Dynamite. It's going to run like 15 minutes over, but NXT has Cody Rhodes, Asuka, John Cena, Paul Heyman. Commercial free for the first half hour.
dude. They're not laying down, which is I mean let's face it. NXT is the C show. It's going against the A show. You have to load it up because NXT gets a half or a third of what SmackDown does, and half of what Raw does.
Going to
So
be big.
yeah, and you got someone coming in on your turf. So yeah, I love it. I think it's going to be one of the funnest nights of the year.
No,
They have Undertaker on there.
I know. I'm glad I'm not covering it, dude. Tomorrow night. I'm off tomorrow night for the show.
Maybe we should. Maybe you
No.
should. Matt, I mean, maybe Matt will be
You and
awake
Matt
for it.
can. Yeah. No, I've got plans tomorrow night. But I was funny. I was talking Friday, Raj. I was shooting on you a little bit. I was talking about the Wednesday Night Wars and about the most miserable time of the last 7 years of doing the Wink podcast was when you made me watch Dynamite and NXT simultaneously and then cover them. And someone was always mad. The NXT fans were like, you need to cover NXT first. And the AEW fans were like, you need to cover AEW first. They would like clock the minutes we discussed each show. It was the absolute worst. And I'm so glad it's over.
It was a thankless job. And I mean, for me too, man. I mean, to this day, you I had a death threat last night.
I know. It's crazy. Fandom is really weird, dude. I mean, there's like a quadrant of people like of tribalism in wrestling, right? And I think that sometimes you just run afoul of somebody and they take a huge issue with something you said. And I feel like with tweets, I mean, dude, you're on Twitter all the time lately. This is what retirement is for you, Raj.
I have no life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's like, please, somebody please ask me my opinion on wrestling. It's all I know at this point. You're like the guy in Shawshank that gets out and decides he has to go back in because he knows nothing else.
Ask me about stocks or wrestling, but the replies I give about stocks get no traction. Wrestling, on the other hand,
you're literally telling people how to make money.
Yes.
You know,
and that gets no traction.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I gotta admit, it's kind of weird. Like, dude, I would rather have my Twitter account just be everyone want to talk. Like, I was watching Canadian commercials from the 80s all weekend. Like, nobody wants to talk about that. But if I'm like, oh, I think so and so should be the next NXT women's champ, like that'll spark a discussion. It's really strange. Or if I'm like, here's how to promote your podcast or get ads, like everyone wants to talk about that. No one sees me for me, Raj. And it just really sometimes bums me out, you know?
The weird part is that AEW is in a period right now where they're I don't know what the right word is, but they're becoming unpopular. Like they're dropping, and so everything I'm saying regarding their popularity dropping is to try to help them out.
Yeah.
It's not like trying to give them shit or I'm not kicking them when they're down. I want to see them get back to where they were. I mean, now we're getting to where their attendance is starting to fall between 3,000 on the show, which is really bad. And so But geez, they're hardcore fans. Just take it as like I'm, like lighting shoes on fire.
Yeah.
Where that's not the case. I want them to do well.
No, absolutely. I think we want there to be competition, but it's disappointing when something happens like Adam Copeland makes his debut. Everyone's excited about it, and then it's just like nothing.
And that is one of the things that, again, reality is that Adam Copeland is not a draw. No one has ever cared about him in the sense of making a difference with numbers. I mean, when he came back to the Royal Rumble years ago, that Raw did the same amount of traffic that it normally does after,
Mm,
for a post Raw Rumble. So, um, yeah, it's just Adam Copeland is not a draw.
mm. Yeah, but remember that Creed My Sacrifice video where it had the most likely to become a WWF superstar in his yearbook quote?
It's a great story for sure, but does it translate? No.
Yeah, I like Adam Copeland quite a bit, but I
I
thought
do too. I
I
mean,
thought Raw's return was great. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. The problem, you know what it is? It's not that it doesn't move the needle. It's that all those fans are already watching AEW. Like you need to get a Brock Lesnar. You need to get somebody who's going to bring in lapsed fans and not just the people that are already watching the product.
there's a handful of people that are truly draws. CM Punk is one.
Mhm.
Um, uh, uh, Obviously, Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns became one. He wasn't for a while, and Adam Copeland is not in that list.
Yeah.
Even for the 1 week, there was the issue with the listings last week where, um, and again, who is to blame for this other than AEW and TBS? But the listings were on for like 4 hours before. It's like, okay, that's not WWE's fault. Ultimately that's your fault. So
Yeah.
if that happens, that's on you. And Adam Copeland, he just is not a draw.
Mm. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow night. It's going to be a hell of a night for
Who
wrestling.
wins? Who do you think?
I think NXT squeaks it out.
All right, here, let me tweet this out. 1 second.
It's very good. Raj is tweeting during this. But no, I think right now it's still an exciting time in wrestling. It's just it's tough to sustain interest and build people's habits. Plus, tomorrow, aren't there like two major sports games going on tomorrow night at the same time as both of these?
Sports games.
I
Is
thought
that
one
what
of
you're
the
saying?
baseball playoffs is going on tomorrow night.
Um, I don't.
Oh, actually,
I,
wait,
ha-
are there two division playoffs tomorrow night?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be what it is. It'll be West playoffs. Let's see. The postseason bracket. Yeah, I believe these are going on currently. I think tomorrow could be a decider. So we'll see.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's gonna just no, pardon me. It's gonna decide, I believe, who goes to the playoffs.
Hockey starts tomorrow,
Oh, there you go.
but no one watches hockey.
Two NHL games. Well, in Vegas, let me tell you something about the Golden Knights, Raj.
Mm,
People here. Oh my God. Look, I lived in the Bay Area during the heyday of the 49ers
yeah.
with Joe Montana. The year they played the Dolphins. Oh my God. People like, you know how many going to grade school, how many kids were wearing shirts that said save the whales, kill the Dolphins? It was big. It
Mm,
was huge. Living in Vegas with the Golden Knights, maybe because it's a newer team still, I have
mm.
not seen hometown support or area support for a team like the Knights since the 49ers in the early 80s.
Okay, so $100. Who wins tomorrow?
NXT.
18-49 as well.
It's tough. I don't know about the demo. Maybe
Yes,
that's a split
Cena,
decision.
Undertaker.
Yeah, those don't really. Well, Cena draws the kids, but does he even draw the kids anymore? They've all grown up.
Ugh.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I got NXT easy for viewers for
Yeah,
sure.
demo might be. I mean, it could be like by a tenth of a point.
because it is ultimately it's still NXT. None of these Cena, Undertaker, none of these guys are in matches. So
Yeah,
I mean, the only main roster person they have for a match is Asuka.
yeah. Sean Murphy saying NXT is going to win viewership. AEW may slightly steal the demo. I go with what Sean Murphy says.
I could see it like being a 0.26 to a 0.24.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And commercial free for the first half hour. It's exciting.
Yeah. I take that back. NXT is going to win but narrowly. I think.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be a hell of a night tomorrow. Look for those Fast Nationals Wednesday. The world will be on the edge of its seat.
Your thoughts on AEW right now in general?
I'm not watching it. I'm not watching anything except the pay-per-views, and even Wrestle Dream. I just tuned in at the end because when I saw Christian was the main event, I was like, Edge is showing up.
Yeah.
And it's just, and part of it too, though, man. It's like I don't watch Raw. I cover NXT and SmackDown. And I've said this before. This is no disrespect to any wrestler. This is no disrespect to any wrestling product. Just know that when you do something, when you have to do something, it becomes work. I don't care how much you love it. And somewhere out there is a professional ice cream taster who loathes going to work every day. And it's like, fuck, if I have to take one more bite of Rocky Road, I'm going to kill somebody.
Yep.
You know, so I didn't watch Fastlane last night, which is actually kind of weird because I normally tune in.
I still haven't seen Fastlane. Yeah.
You know, Wink doesn't cover most of the pay-per-views anymore.
What?
Nope. No Fastlane covers. They didn't cover Money in the Bank.
Are you kidding?
Nope. So
you know that this under my watch that wouldn't have happened.
That never would have happened.
Never would have happened.
But what did we watch? Oh, you know what we watched instead of Fastlane? We watched that new The Boys spinoff, Gen V.
Oh,
Generation
yeah,
V.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. That's the first thing we've actually watched, like binged since Succession ended. We tried to watch Warrior on HBO Max. It's good, but it got a little repetitive. But Gen V, highly recommend. Very good.
Wrestling Inc. Stop dropping the ball. It was handed to you.
They owe you money still, Raj.
Jesus Christ. Run with it. It's there. It's free money. Jesus.
No, it's all good. They've been very nice. They've been very good. Yeah. Hey, Raj, you know, they doubled everyone's rates after they took over.
They did.
On the podcast.
And they're doing half the shows, but okay.
But they doubled the rates, Raj. That's what's important. Anyhow, back to the matter at hand, because this is not a wrestling podcast.
Let's stick with the wrestling a little bit. Why not?
We're going to change the title of this. Gigantic Pop Sticks, the one that went off the rails. No, I think wrestling is exciting. It's a very good time right now for professional wrestling. There's a lot of competition, even with Endeavor in the picture.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're seeing we're at a point where WWE is the hottest it's ever been in this century, you know, and AEW is the victim of that because they haven't been able to keep up, and they have had the unfortunate circumstance of being there when WWE got hot. You know, I would say for the first 3 years of WWE versus AEW, AEW was way hotter. Like it was way more interesting. And then now, in the past year, WWE just turned it way the fuck up. And now, you know, that's not the case anymore.
Do you think part of it is imagine you're dating someone for like 10 years or even 2 years, and then you break up. The next person you date is going to seem like the most exciting person ever for the first 3 to 4 months. And then eventually you realize like all relationships are different. There are ups and downs, and perhaps you should get back together with your ex.
Well, you know,
I say this, Raj and I have both been in committed relationships for decades. But no, I think there's a newness factor, and I think with AEW
and balls being fondled, you know, that doesn't, you know, a lot of times that doesn't happen with a prior relationship. But
But I think with AEW, they did a lot of stuff right. But I think that it was like I've made this comparison a million times. It's Sega versus Nintendo. And Nintendo was viewed as old and stuffy and very set in its ways. And it was like, oh, we get a great game every once in a while, but then we get a lot of stuff that was like, oh, what's this crap? Who wants to play? Why is this version of Marble Madness for the NES nowhere near as good as the arcade? So Sega came along and it was like, oh, these are just like the arcade games. This is new and exciting. But then ultimately you came to realize Sega had a lot of the same problems Nintendo did. They just manifested in different ways. And Nintendo was able to reclaim the crown. And the thing that Sega did smart, and I say this because I was a journalist at the time, covering the industry, is Sega was better with the press and AEW was better with the press. Dude, like Wrestling Inc., Fightful, all these publications, there were no press conferences WWE had that they got invited to. They weren't getting, like, Wink wasn't getting at. But I remember when we started doing the podcast, it was like, oh, can we interview so and so? And they were like, they don't give us interviews. It was like, maybe we get a media day at WrestleMania. That's it, or SummerSlam. But now they like WWE became more press friendly because they realized AEW was eating their lunch.
I mean, Wrestling Inc. When I sold it, we were doing, 30 million page views a month. And they opened that up. They were getting better and better over the years, but they're the most open they've ever been right now.
Remember when we had Heath Slater as a guest on Wink and he was afraid to talk about anything except his wrestling school because he was afraid he was going to get in trouble?
Right. Yeah.
And he gave the worst answers in the sense. The worst thing, it's like, do you ever get one of those cameos for somebody? And you're like, hey, talk about this thing. And they're like, oh, yeah, that thing. Sure had a good time doing that. It's like, they're just afraid to go into any detail. It was the worst interview I've ever conducted. And I think they've gotten better with the press as a response to AEW courting the press.
Which, and when we did Heath Slater, he was actually not with WWE when he did it.
Was he? I thought he was.
No, I think he was. He had just gotten released, right?
Or no, he was still there, dude. He was still there. It was a Wednesday morning.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
And we had to do it by phone, and you had to like hold up the phone to the mic because he couldn't get his Zoom working.
Yeah.
Well, and then if we're talking memories, remember we were going to interview Bret Hart about like this weird, kind of shady sounding like business loan business, and we're going to get to ask him some wrestling questions, and he backed out into the last minute.
We were literally the last minute. We're waiting for him to join on.
Yes.
And Bret Hart is the one that got away. He's I met him at the airport. I've met him many times. And then just whenever it came time to actually do the interview, he just skipped away. And I respect Bret is one of those guys that I respect more than anyone.
Absolutely.
And,
look, Wrestling with Shadows is what got me back into wrestling, like right before Tough Enough launched, and that was like the 1-2 of those two things. But so when it comes to interviews, let's talk about this because again, this is the episode that went off the rails, folks.
Yeah.
We're gonna postpone.
Nightmare on Elm Street, Friday the 13th.
We're gonna talk about that next week. Next week with Matt.
Yeah.
We'll talk about what Matt was dreaming about when he missed the podcast. So when it comes to interviews, I've got a little experience with interviewing like executives, and then with actors or performers. With the Yellow Jackets Buzz podcast I do with Issa, we've interviewed many actors and directors on the show. Interviewed Eduardo Sanchez, who wrote and directed the Blair Witch Project. Mm-hmm. My interview style is I like to ask people, some of the basic questions that they're used to answering, but then I want to go deep. It's actually funny. It's a lot like what Sean Evans does on Hot Ones. I want to hit them with something that's meaningful but obscure, that's gonna, get a story they haven't told 1,000 times. And because I just feel like when we see a lot of these interviews now, that it's like, are they in kayfabe or not? If it's a current performer, it's the same shit again and again. Like, what's your approach to interviewing talent?
Well, there are some people. There's someone like Diamond Dallas Page, right? When I interview him, you ask him one question and it goes 55 minutes with just him answering one question, which is awesome. Then you get someone like Harley Race when I would interview him, and it's like, it's like, so what was your favorite match? Yeah. Like it was very difficult. And then you get someone like Hulk Hogan, who is just full of shit. You can't believe half the stuff he's saying, and
Yeah.
so it's like the stuff he's saying, you can't really use it as a soundbite because it's full of shit. Then you get The Rock or John Cena who get very um, company friendly answers,
Yeah.
but they're great. Like they're the shit, and so yeah, it's just weird. But as far as the most interesting people to interview, uh, I thought it was Jake the Snake
Hmm.
because he would just throw in stuff where just like whoa, like wow. And granted, a lot of it was before he got clean,
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah. I can only
uh,
imagine.
but he was just no holes barred, and yeah, him and I'm trying to think of who else. Medusa was always great too.
Yeah. No, I think when people have zero Fs when they're at that stage of their career, it's
Yeah,
always a better interview. I think the challenge is sometimes that, especially with current talent, they're so rehearsed. I mean, I have to commend Issa, the interview she did, like with Dominic Mysterio, that was like kayfabe.
yeah.
Like I love that. I love when people really keep it there. These press conferences, though, and credit to Sean Ross Sapp because he co-signed this opinion that someone else had. Like they almost need to tell the press before these WWE press conferences, like, is this in character or are we talking about the business here? Because you're gonna hit people with these questions, and most wrestlers are gonna be so up in their head about what to say. But in kayfabe, it's much like talking smack. They can have a lot more latitude to do something interesting and make it entertaining, you know?
hmm you know what?
Hmm.
What's the least favorite wrestler you've ever interviewed?
I haven't interviewed that many. I mean, honestly, like we had the Heath one was pretty bad.
That was bad.
It's kind of weird. I remember back when I started doing the Wink podcast, there was this thing where it's like, oh, now I'll probably get to do interviews. And you were like, yeah, we don't get to interview anyone currently. I was like, okay. But for No Mercy, like I thought about it because I knew Wink wasn't sending someone. I was like, I could drive to Bakersfield. I bet I could get press and do some
Yeah.
interviews. And then I was like, like, though, here's the one thing about NXT. And remember, people don't know this. The NXT podcast for like a 24-hour period was almost canceled. And I had to fight Raj. I
Yeah.
had to have Raj fight for me to keep it. And part of the reason why is it's like Wink and Fightful, like nobody really covers NXT. And
Right.
maybe it's a little bit of an ego thing, but yeah, we hear all the time secondhand or even sometimes directly, like everyone on NXT pays attention to the Wink podcast because it's one of two podcasts that talk about their and I like
Yeah.
that. That's cool. You know, I mean, it's cool to have like some sphere of recognition. So that's why I almost went to No Mercy because I thought it would have been really cool just to meet some of the talent. But then again, I almost wonder with a lot of it, like, as viewers, we have our own internal head canon. So you could talk to a character and there's like, I don't know what to say. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. I'll
you
say
know,
this. I will say this. Yeah, as bad as Heath Slater was, he
yeah,
was nice.
it was very nice.
There were a couple. Gosh, I hate to say it. Scott Hall definitely did not want to be there when I interviewed him. Uh, I could tell, like I mean, the interview started with, "I'm doing this because of TDP." Like he basically right off the bat said, "I don't want to be talking to you." Um, but I get it. I mean, he'd gotten a lot of bad press back then, and and then once we started talking, he was fucking great. Um, Jake the Snake, the first time I did it, uh, was rough. Um, he he was great, and then once it was the 20 minutes hit, he just like shut off
Yeah.
completely.
Wow.
And so Harley race was a tough one because Harley is Harley.
Yeah.
He's great. He's a legend. But yeah,
When we were doing Wednesday mornings, when we were doing SmackDown the day after,
Yeah.
we had some good. We had Sean Devari.
Yep.
He was fun. We had Court Bauer,
Yep.
who was fun. And those guys, what I liked about both of them is they just felt like they were hanging out with us, which was nice. Sammy Callahan was
Right.
cool.
Yeah.
Like he mellowed out. At first I thought he was trying too hard, but then it was just kind of fun just to talk. And he was telling us stuff about the Solomon Crow gimmick at the time because that had just ended.
Yeah.
He was good. We had some decent ones on Wednesday mornings.
Yeah.
Doing that, for me, the one that was a little bit of a disappointment. I mean, it was one where it's like I shouldn't have even been on the episode. Was when we finally had Ryback on, because it's like it was just Ryback and Matt.
That was a nighttime.
Yeah, it was nighttime,
and
we didn't talk about Raw. It was just Ryback and Matt shooting the shit, basically. Like you and I didn't even need to be on that episode. Like
excuse me, I'm here too.
But you know what's really weird? So what I hate is I think with Ryback and other people, it's like sometimes when they do get so comfortable, then you try and make a joke or something, and it's just like, man, I really hope they get my sense of humor, or else this is going to go horribly wrong.
I told you about Ryback.
I didn't. I mean, you were doing his podcast. You were doing his show for a while.
I was doing his show for a while. He blocked me after that. I have no idea why.
He blocked me too. I think he blocked like 1,000 people.
And one day he called me and just went off for about like 5 minutes. This is an exclusive to our podcast subscribers, but he's like, "You stupid motherfucker! I'm gonna, blah 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 blah." And I'm like, "Dude, I don't run the site. I don't even go to the site anymore. I don't know what you're talking about." And he's like, "Well, yeah, well, it's all you people that are involved with that kind of shit." And that's like, dude. Just relax. I'm on your side, brother. But geez, he just went off.
Yeah. I've never had that happen. I've had a couple talents that have privately thanked me for putting them over or recognizing the work they were doing. And that's nice to get like a DM.
It is, yeah.
Like that. I've had some good conversations with people in the business.
Opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have good conversations with like X-Pac about business. So for people that don't know, I also run an ad agency and we do a lot of the Blue Chew sponsorships and about 20 other brands. So like I've talked to X-Pac before about that. I talked to Al Snow before about sponsoring OVW. Was on an interesting call with Enzo once. And his manager, because before his current podcast, he was going to do a podcast with Cass back like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Talk to Gallus and Anderson, but those are fun because those are more just like informal business calls.
Enzo's one of those that I don't know what's real or what's not, or what was legit, but he had more charisma than almost any one I've seen in the last 10, 15 years outside of, Roman Reigns has a different kind of charisma, but that dude, he just had it. And
Triple H being in charge of WWE now supposedly is going to put a dead stop to Enzo ever coming back. Vince would have brought him back eventually.
Enzo had it, though. I know. Like he didn't have it as a wrestler, but he had it as a talking, as a personality, as a manager.
Bayley versus Sasha takeover absolutely is 100% what got me back into wrestling and watching NXT takeover Brooklyn. But the next week, seeing Enzo and Cass and seeing their stuff, that along with a handful of other performers is really what got me reinvested in NXT. As those people got called up, I started watching the main roster again. It's like he's part of it, man. And I think he's still, generationally one of the best talkers in the business. It's just that, behind the scenes rubbed too many people the wrong way. And when those allegations came out, which later there did not prove to be any legal merit to them.
Right.
I didn't see people were not bending over backwards to accommodate or bring him back. But that being said, if he had not done the Survivor Series thing he did, I think Vince would have brought him back 100% within the next year.
He acted the fool.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, but I didn't know he was in the
Glenn,
New Japan.
you,
I'm sorry.
you got a Trump impression here?
No, I'm not really an impressionist. My impressions are pretty bad.
Let's see. Come on.
Uh, Huge. No, I don't know. I've never tried to do
No.
Trump
Oh,
before.
no.
No, you know what it is?
Huge,
Well, no,
huge.
with Trump, it's more the double talk of the, it's
It's
very
huge.
interesting. It's very interesting what people are saying, what they're saying. You wouldn't believe what they're saying, but the things I'm hearing from the people, it's crazy. If you heard what the people are saying,
Have you heard what the people say? It's huge. It's huge.
Yeah, it's more that manner. It's more like it's that Michael Scott like filibustering while hoping that a brilliant thought comes to you. That's what I think is interesting. But you know what's funny though, and I get a lot of shit from this in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Like before 2016, like 10 years ago, like I would get pumped when there was a new season of The Celebrity Apprentice. I'd be like, this is gonna be awesome. I'm so excited about this, like all of it. And like I would be like, yeah, it was a very interesting transition. But that's what happens when any celebrity goes into politics, is it really reframes the way you see them. And I mean, it happened with Arnold. There was a long time, now everyone loves Arnold again, but you remember being in California, there was a period of time people were not really that thrilled with him.
I think Arnold was one of the best governors that California's had, and I'm not. I mean, you know me. I'm not a Republican, but I thought Arnold was exactly what they needed at that point,
Mm.
and probably need right now. Jeez, I mean, it's just a shit show over there.
Yeah, I feel like
I'm lefty, but Jesus
it's a weird
Christ,
time right now. It's a
yeah,
weird time. But no, I think in terms of interviews, I think that it's tough sometimes because you want to be able to get into it. You want to be able to have real talk. You don't want to offend anybody. But at
right.
the same time, you also have to think about, what do people want to talk about? What's their agenda with the interview? What are they trying to get over? Like, what's the point of doing it? But look, man, I've had some great non-interview moments hanging out with the wrestlers. I think one of the great benefits of again, my day job is, we sponsored the Starcast where Double or Nothing was had.
Mm.
And we sponsored the one in Chicago after that. So as one of the main sponsors, I had essentially an all access pass to hang out backstage. Like, I've seen MJF out of character. CM Punk was the nicest guy ever. I was there with Jesse Davin, hanging out. She was doing some work, some promotional work, doing handouts for me. We were backstage. CM Punk was me with Conrad, just came over. Didn't have to. We were just in a corner, said, "Hey, my name's Phil. How are you guys doing?" Introduced himself. Like, the nicest guy. And it's really interesting just to be able to be around people when there's no pretense and just sort of get a taste of who they are.
Yeah. Me and Conrad, the night after we met up, we got hammered, but it was, and we got hammered as well.
Yeah,
Not, me more than you, but
you definitely. Yes, well, I don't drink at professional events, man.
But me and Conrad, we got wasted, but it was a completely fun, off the cuff discussion that we had, and it was, it was. Not everything has to be so serious, and that was one of those times where, and me and Eric Bischoff. I mean, the night before that, we had quite a few drinks, and 0% of that ever got out. And so
that's good. No, look, I mean, I wanted to talk to Eric at the dinner I had with him and Conrad. I wanted to talk more about his time doing TV production, than I did want to talk about WCW. It was.
Let me get a couple of these questions.
Yeah, please. Too. Oh, Bear Hudson asking, does it make sense for WWE to sign CM Punk?
What do you think? I think absolutely.
Yeah, it's for all the wrong reasons.
You think so?
I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, man. It is kind of like getting back together with your ex, despite the guy she went out with after you. Like, now we're back together. This was always meant to be. This is true love. What you had was a fling. You know?
Yeah, but at the same time, it is what's best for business, and there's no way Punk can pull off the kind of shit he was doing in AEW that,
Yeah.
he couldn't do that in WWE. Roman Reigns would smack him if he tried to do that.
It's funny he pulled it off in AEW, given that everyone saw his UFC career. It's hilarious that anybody thought this is the guy that can throw down.
Well, you're talking about Jungle Boy,
Oh,
like
shit.
I'd push around Jungle Boy.
But no, I think it would be cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's for all the wrong reasons. What else we got?
Wait, actually, Kumar, Raj, favorite wrestler that put you over?
Oh.
Ric Flair for me. Who would you say?
I mean, I don't want to violate any of the off the record DMs I've got from people, so I'm trying to think of like who
Yeah.
said something really nice. I don't think anyone's ever said it publicly, to be honest. I think it's all been sort of. I think it's people don't want to play favorites.
Ric Flair for me because his 1 year anniversary after he got
Oh
hospitalized,
yeah,
and he chose me to be the person that interviews him 1 year after, and to have one of the greatest of all time and choosing me
yeah.
to do it, that was a different level. So
Oh, that's
yeah, Ric
awesome,
Flair
dude.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we get people that are like, "Oh yeah, Wrestling Inc. Yeah, you guys do a really good thing," or they'll be like, "Wrestling Inc. Oh, you the podcast that Vince Russo does." You're like, yeah, you've clearly paid attention the last 8 years.
It's only been like 15 years,
Yeah,
but
I know, but yeah, it's how did that start? How did that start with Vince Russo on the Wink Pod pre-me? Because I know I replaced Sean, but how did it start with Vince?
well, I remember. So me and Vince Russo met for lunch, and I remember thinking like it would be great to get uh, the opinion of someone that was actually there, um, to on a podcast. And this was, yeah, I mean, this was what 15 years ago. Yeah, what was WrestleMania 32? So this was actually it was like 10 years ago, and I know Sean Rossap. He wasn't comfortable within it at first, but
Hmm.
and since then I think they have grown to hate each other. But for a while there, they actually they had a they had good chemistry. So um, yeah, it
I
was
remember we had Vince back. We had Vince not back on like 2 or 3 times when I
he
was
wore
doing
the
it.
muscle shirt one time.
Yeah, but I remember he was so dismissive of current everything. He'd be like, and then up next was Mojo Rawley. And he'd be like, I don't give a fuck about this Mojo Jojo bullshit. And it would just be like, okay, dude, put a shirt on. You're making me uncomfortable. But yeah, he like just didn't care. But that's interesting though, because his involvement, because dude, I mean, we've told this story. I've told this story, but I'll tell it again. Because Sean was doing the podcast. Sean doesn't even know this. I'm gonna spill the tea
Mm,
here on this. When I
okay.
started my agency in 2016, I left a gig at a network. The big keyword for my business is podcast advertising. So for my agency's Twitter account, I actually had a bot set up and I would
Mhm.
auto like any tweet that mentioned the word podcast and advertising. And
Yeah.
Sean, and we're not going to get into this, but Sean was trying to sell advertising on the Wink podcast. And he was like, hey, is anyone looking to buy advertising on the Wrestling Inc. podcast? DM me. And I auto liked the tweet. Didn't even do it. Didn't even know who Sean or was. I'd seen Wrestling Inc. maybe 20 years ago, but wasn't familiar. And Sean like emailed me. He found my website because he's like, I saw you liked my tweet. I need to sell ads on this podcast. Let's
Yeah.
talk. And because I was buying ads on podcasts, I was a wrestling fan. I was like, okay, Sean, we're going to buy ads in the Wing podcast. He left Wrestling Inc. like maybe a month later. And he
Mhm.
was like, talk to Raj about ads. And I talked to you. And now David Bixenspan. I love David Bixenspan. He's a great journalist. But I know as a
Is
podcast
he?
host, I think he is. I think he is in the sense of when you ask
He's
the
biased.
question,
I
well,
I like David.
I
He's
think
a
all
friend.
journalists have some sort of inherent bias. Now, David, I'm sure would say his bias is towards the truth.
Sure.
But if you were to say who's actually doing journalism, old school journalism, like
Mhm.
real journalism in the world of wrestling, not what
Mhm.
he hears from sources, not, oh, there's this gossip or this, or not, oh, there was this filing. He does do some trademark stuff, but dude is publishing Freedom of Information Act requests. that he's
Right.
submitting. Like David really cares about trying to get the story. And so he was hosting the podcast. I do not think that I think he's been interesting as a guest, but I don't think hosting was his main skill. But I remember you asked me, I was talking about advertising and I made a few jokes about wrestling and references, and you were like, what was your take? Because we haven't talked about this. Were you just like, this guy seems like he could talk about wrestling. We need to book him on the podcast.
I mean, my thing has always been, in general,
Yeah.
uh, with wrestling. Um, first off, I want the podcast to be unbiased, right?
Yes.
So I always felt like that was a big deal for me because there is so much. Gosh, I don't know if tonight's the night, but well, whatever. There is a lot of bias towards AEW with journalists, right? And I
Yeah.
didn't want to be a part of that culture. I don't want to be pro WWE. I don't want to pro AEW. I want to be unbiased. Um, but you listen to certain podcasts that are out there when it comes to AEW. Um, they will criticize it when they have to.
Mm.
Uh,
Yeah, I know what you're. I don't want to make the comparison to another news organization,
yeah.
but yes, there's tribalism. There's
Yes.
definitely some sort of allegiance, and it doesn't mean you're detached from reality, but it means that you have an inclination to try and support the narrative of the people that you like.
Right. And when it like they're not bringing up this. SmackDown has been number one on all of
Mhm.
Friday nights for like the last 20 weeks,
Yeah, it's
right?
monster.
Yeah, which is huge. But they will bring up like they're like, oh well, it came in third place. Rampage came in third place, but only behind Paw Patrol. It's like you know, where you see the narrative that is being out there, and yeah,
But when
and
you and
look,
well, I'm sorry, but when you and I had that talk in 2016, just to finish this story,
yeah.
I made a joke. I was wearing my Becky Lynch last kicker shirt. I was like, can't wear this out in public. You laughed. You were like, hey, do you want to be a guest on the Wrestling Inc. podcast? What was your inclination? Because we were having a talk about ad sales and you
Yeah.
invited me as a guest on the podcast.
Look, it's funny with you, with
Yeah.
and with Matt. Like with Matt, I knew he's an AEW guy, right?
But this
And
was before that. This was long
yes,
before
and
that. Yeah.
but I've
Yeah.
always known like you're
Yeah.
pretty unbiased. Like I can talk to you
Yeah.
and not have a narrative being thrown at me, and and which I've always loved with us. I feel like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we can discuss stuff and not have a bias that's out there. Matt, there's going to be a bias that's out there, which is fine.
But he also
Um,
brings a lot of history, but it was crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
and he's been there, done that. So yeah,
But it's
and
crazy
and,
though. Yeah. I'm sorry.
and he's not as bad as he once was too.
There you go, Matt. Those are endorsing words. But so back in 2016, I think it was an episode of SmackDown. Maybe it was Raw, probably Raw. So
Mm,
I guested on the podcast, and I remember because like with David and you, like it just hadn't found its rhythm post Sean.
right.
Sean had gotten good. And by the way, I'm also leaving out, and I think I might have mentioned this to you. Maybe I mentioned this to you. I'd
Mhm.
done podcasting before. I'd done video things.
Yeah,
I'd done radio. I did radio with Leo Laporte 30 years ago.
yeah.
But I remember guesting with you and David, and it was maybe 5 minutes later. I said to my wife, right when I got off, I was like, I think they're going to ask me to host the podcast. And literally the email came in a minute later where you were like, do you want to start hosting the podcast?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, me, Sean, and Vince had a chemistry,
Yes.
uh, and I felt like I hadn't found that again until it was you, me, and Matt.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
And I felt like you, me, and Matt had it just it was very different, but it was chemistry that just shot us to the moon,
And Matt
like
did not like me at first. If you go back,
he didn't like me.
there was an early episode where he basically like not only told me to shut up, but like yelled at me for like interrupting him.
Well, I mean, me and Matt have had a couple of fights on air.
Yeah. You know what you know what the turning point was though, where there was like some event going on someday and it was like, oh, Glenn's not going to be covering that. Matt's like,
During
what do you have
COVID.
to do? No, this was back in like 2017. This was back like 6 months in.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And so, and this is part of the reason why we're doing this podcast now. It's like Matt was like, "What's so important that's most better than wrestling? What stupid thing do you have to do?" And I'm like, "There's a screening of Grease 2 with the main star that played Cool Rider." And Matt took a second, and B was like, "That was actually a really awesome movie." And as a kid, like I thought I could fix up a motorcycle.
Yeah.
Like Matt just popped massively for me talking about Grease 2. And after that, we were cool.
Yeah.
You know? But before that, like he seemed like puzzled by a lot of my behavior, and then he became tickled by it. And
I think at this point now, he likes you better than he likes me.
Probably. No, he and I get along, dude. I mean, we were doing that stuff on stereo. Like, it's interesting because we are very different in a lot of ways, but we do have like a weird Venn diagram overlap of some interests.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of a dork in some ways.
He, Matt's I remember there was a guy that used to work on site that just had it out for Matt.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm not gonna say. I'm not gonna mention any names. Yeah, I had it out for him. You know who.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
And I was like, man, you just don't know Matt. He's just one of the nicest, most what's the right word? Just his heart is in the right place.
Yeah, he's very like one of the most sincere dudes, like who just cares, like to 11. You know?
Yeah. He's not even on 10 yet. He's on 12, right?
Yeah.
But he's just the sweetest guy, and they just wanted him fired constantly to where it was just like, dude, you're going before Matt goes,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think people have their preferences and their allegiances, and I think that sometimes people just get it in their head about certain folks. And granted, the world we live in, I know that I get the times we live in, and sometimes it's almost easier not to know too much, about a person, because I think it's very easy to just decide you don't like somebody based on one aspect of their personality, and it's silly.
And it's a complicated world, if we're shutting a person completely off because of their politics or their preferences, or
that used to not happen.
How are we going to get farther as a society?
And the world was a better place when it used to be that people could be on opposite sides of the aisle and still hang out with each other after hours and have a civil conversation. You can disagree without being disagreeable. And I think that there's no one person, side, or viewpoint that is responsible for that rhetoric. But no, that's the world we live in. But no, it's interesting with Matt because originally we didn't really get along. Then we started getting along. Then at a certain point, like you started dipping more on the podcast, and it was just like, there was a long time where it's like, oh, this is just great. Just me and Matt are going to hang out on Monday. And like what I always love about going off topic with Matt is if Matt's interested in the off topic thing, you would have to be the one to rein us in, because Matt will entertain whatever off topic thing we had for as long as it went, as long as he was into it. If he didn't care, he'd be like, get back to wrestling.
I was the one. I would always be the one to be like, okay, Raw, guys, Raw.
Yeah, and Matt would be like, we got to talk more about the movie Rad and dancing on bicycles. Yeah, but I think that I don't know. I mean, that's been my joy in doing this again with you guys, is that it's fun. And don't get me wrong, like I love Issa. I love doing the show with Issa and Alfred. It's like Issa and I love talking about wrestling so much that we started doing a Yellow Jackets podcast together. We've talked about doing another podcast together about Spanish music. But you do form that sort of relationship with people when you do this over time. And especially in COVID, it just sort of highlighted the fact that it's like, you kind of, I mean, I don't know. Like, I realized how many acquaintances I had. I realized how few friends I had that I kept in regular contact with. And it's like with you and Matt, yeah, that's what I've said about with this was Gigantic Pop. I mean, it's cool that people watch, but part of me, it's like, I know people that just do a weekly Zoom chat with their friends as literally just an excuse to have a social life. So this doesn't seem that far off.
I feel like with Gigantic Pop, it's three buddies hanging out. We haven't
Yeah.
quite figured out what this podcast is yet.
Yeah.
Like but we just have a great time hanging out. And
Yeah.
whatever the topic is, whether it's Karate Kid or maybe next week we'll do Nightmare on Elm
So
Street.
next week we're doing Freddie and Jason, and we're gonna talk about stuff. But dude, even on the Stereo Show and on the Wrestling Inc., I mean, the details that came out. I mean, the night you guys learned that I was in a band. I used to be a band the first time, and Matt listened to it. Matt was like, "Hey, this is actually really good." Or then when Matt talked about getting shot, and we were like, "Hold the phone, Matt got shot." Like, what? Like, he would surprise us,
Glenn, you always surprise me. Your life is way more interesting than mine. Like you ran into Jojo Siwa.
Wait, did I tell you about my phone call with Rudy Giuliani like 6 months ago?
What? No, you did not tell me that.
Rudy Giuliani wanted ads on his podcast, and I get an email to my company signed Rudy Giuliani. Like, I'm looking for ads on my podcast. And so I'm just like, this is bullshit, right? Like, I'm not going to respond. And I get another email saying, hey, I want ads on my podcast. And then finally I respond. I'm like, here's my calendar link. Let's set up a call. And I get on the call, and then Rudy Giuliani joins the phone call. And look, I don't agree with that man about things. I think he's done a lot of damage to his own reputation and to others in recent years. He's had a lot of bad behavior. But 20 years ago, dude, if he would have retired 20 years ago, he would have been one of the most beloved political figures of all time.
He didn't go out on top.
No. But I'll tell you what, though, this on the phone, nicest dude. Funny, engaging, telling me stories about random things. I didn't want to get off the phone with him. I just felt like I was talking to like I was like talking to like your great uncle or something. It was really weird. But I was like, we're not going to place ads on your podcast because we're not crazy, but here's some people that you might want to talk to, It's
too bad. He because he was a moderate for a long time.
Yeah.
And stay out of politics, but
I know. No, it's crazy though. But no, so yes, my life is occasionally interesting. The Jojo Siwa thing was interesting.
No. Your life is way more interesting than mine for sure. Raj, explain why WWE has been on fire from an economic standpoint. Even NXT is up year over year. Explain. What do you think?
Well, okay. Well, live events, number one, like taking all that time off during COVID. Mm-hmm. And people wanting to go out again. I mean, look, inflation is real. And there's like real inflation when you talk about the value of the dollar, but then you talk about corporate inflation and raising prices. WWE has realized there's enough demand for their product that they can charge more. They're still doing their highest growth. Now they're doing their highest grossing, best attended live events ever in most of the markets that they're playing in. I think people were deprived of entertainment for a long time. That helps.
That's part of it, but I think it actually was better.
Yeah. Triple H made things a lot better.
The Bloodline storyline last year was the best thing we've seen in wrestling in like 20 years. I feel like Roman Reigns has just been on another level, and just combining all that, Sami Zayn was hot as hell. Cody Rhodes, getting him at that right time. It's just been and LA Knight right now, his ascension. Like, I can watch SmackDown easily. Raw is a different story.
No. And NXT is the easiest watch. NXT is still my favorite wrestling show in all professional wrestling. It's the most entertaining, the least stale, the least repetition and boring spots. Like, it's just it's good. And I think that you know what's funny? NXT was at its worst, and I got a lot of shit about this during the time, but when it was trying to be AEW, when the Undisputed Era was running things, NXT got really boring for that period of the Black and Gold brand.
Yeah. What do you think about CM Punk?
No, I think we talked about this earlier, but I think he's going to come back.
You
Regardless
think
of the
so?
reasoning, I think he's going to make a return.
Okay, hold on. Let me throw this out there.
And I got some thoughts about Akshay Kumar's question, but yeah, to Justin's point, there was a lot of wrestling. Here's the thing about NXT: if you like a little bit of that old school glow southpaw wrestling, like, hey, we're doing crazy shit, and our tag team champion, his gimmick is literally that he's in the mafia, like. Like
Yeah.
NXT is the show for you. It's not afraid to throw everything against the wall. It has really good wrestling, but it also it's not afraid to be silly. You know, Al Snow took my quote on Wrestlers on Netflix is when he said wrestling is the Muppet Show. I've been saying that for 7 years now. You know, and NXT is the Muppet Show, man. Like it's a show about this wacky promotion, and it's fun as hell to watch. Actually, Kumar has a question about venue stuff. With AEW's inability to fill houses, why not downsize the arena's thoughts? Raj, I don't know about you, but Ring of Honor, they got all these, like, they got so much talent that you can't sell tickets. You could sell tickets on MJF, Adam Copeland, Chris Jericho, Christian. They've got names, but with WWE, if you start saying, hey, we got John Cena, Roman Reigns, Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, WWE has more recognizable talent right now. AEW loaded up the roster with a lot of people that are used to selling out 1,000-seat venues, and more power to them. But AEW is trying to compete on a grand stage, and they haven't built. They have so much talent. It's been a detriment to their ability to keep building talent.
Well, kind of what we mentioned earlier. I feel like AEW, they have their hardcore fans,
Yeah,
and they've reached it, and they've got them. But if you want to grow, you have to go beyond that, and they're not going beyond that. And WWE, it was the same thing. They hadn't been going beyond that until last year, and then they struck gold and grew. I just think AEW right now is they don't. They're assuming everyone knows who Shibata is and Okada is and whatnot. And at some point, you got to realize that you're the number two promotion in the world, not just the US, but in the world. And you got to act accordingly. And part of that is um, bringing up your fans, bringing them up to speed on what's going on, and just I don't know, just not taking things for granted. What do you think?
I mean, Tony Khan and AEW had this famous spirit of like, oh, we don't need a bunch of writers. That's what's ruining WWE.
Right. Yeah.
Vince McMahon was what was ruining WWE. It wasn't the writer's fault. And if you look at any former WWE writer, like just ask them about pitches they had that didn't get accepted, and they'll tell you 20 great things you could have seen on the air if Vince had shot it down. Tony Khan, now they've got Jimmy Jacobs, which should be good because he was responsible for a great era in WWE for some great stuff like listed Jericho, some other great storylines. But no, they need some real writers in there to get some clear, easy to understand storylines. So aside from MJF, we can have more stuff that people want to tune in and watch on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and also realizing that the hardcore wrestling fan base is a limited fan base, and you've got to expand beyond that.
And we talked about that last week. I mean, with how wrestling started, like we didn't know anything as kids when we saw Hulk Hogan and Rocky III in the first WrestleMania.
Right.
No kid was watching the first WrestleMania and being like, sure, a lot of rest holds in these matches. I mean, we were pretty sure Hulk Hogan and Mr. T were going to win, even when I thought it was real. I thought Hulk Hogan and Mr. T were going to win. But that's the thing, man. It's like, if you're going just to the smart marks, if that's your audience, you're only going to get so far. And I think AEW hasn't gone beyond that. I mean, and I'll say this, like Orange Cassidy, I think his gimmick is amazing, but it is also a bit of a smart gimmick. Like you have to watch that and play along with it. Like that is a very kayfabe gimmick and it's great. And I know kids have gotten into that. I know other fans have watched them. I'm like, what the hell? But it is a very like, that is not a gimmick that's going to lend credibility and believability to wrestling. That's like, oh, we're all in on the joke.
Right. Yeah.
And
and I think Tony Khan is a little, we were talking about CM Punk earlier. CM Punk, he's not pulling this kind of shit in WWE, right?
No.
Like there's no way he's doing he's not, punking Christopher Daniels, a producer in WWE.
He didn't want to be there though. He did this last thing
clearly
to get fired.
Yeah, it seems like it for sure. Yeah,
I mean, you don't. But what Jungle Boy did, if it hadn't been that, it would have been something else.
Yeah, it was basically clearly Punk wants to be in WWE. It's not so much. Who knows if they want him as well? I think it's to their benefit to have him, but there is a lot of baggage that goes with it.
Do you think he already looked at the calendar for Survivor Series in Chicago and was like, I've got to get fired by this date?
I don't think so. No.
But that's the move. But look, that's too good of a place for the WWE.
No, I think, the Jungle Boy thing, again, I think Jungle Boy should have been fired. He went into business for himself. Called out a top star on their TV, and anyone watching that knew that that's going to lead to problems, right? Like you'd have to be a total idiot to not assume that that's going to escalate. And Jungle Boy chose violence, and he should have been fired, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and CM Punk. I'm not defending him either. He shouldn't have, but any person with rational thinking knew that was going to be an issue. And yeah,
no, that makes sense.
Cry me a river.
Yes,
you are you have no pull, and to be able to act so smug. God, I don't know. I just he's a douche, right?
Yeah, I agree. But and it's weird that when you think back to him doing that Fox gig with WWE, like him being willing to do that, like he's had I wonder what's going on in that guy's head. But when he came back to AEW, when he made when he debuted in AEW, like he was so positive and thoughtful, and he's fallen in love with wrestling again, and it's just very interesting. And then Brawl Out happened. I don't know. Gotta be tough, man.
He's a douche.
Yeah.
He's a douche.
Well, anything else before we wrap up this off the rails edition of Gigantic Pop?
We never heard from Matt.
Matt fell asleep. Next week, Freddie Jason. Maybe we're gonna do it on Sunday again. Maybe we'll do another Monday. We'll see what happens. We'll see. It's just it's the evening Pacific time. I like to have my evenings a little bit.
This was fun. We got to talk a little wrestling, a little business.
Yes. But no, we appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. The live numbers tonight, fantastic. Please, everybody, like and subscribe to this channel. Look, here's the deal. I'm going to pull back the curtain. I'm going to shoot here for a second. We really want to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. YouTube has tiers and things on lock and whatnot. We just want to get to 1,000 subscribers. Audio's good.
We're halfway there.
Audio's been going well, but the YouTube numbers, I'd really like just a little more. Please, and let people know. I still get things. People like, you guys are doing a podcast together again? Yeah, we are. We're back. And we're finding our way. We're making our way the only way we know how.
Yeah.
And follow Raj at the Raj Giri. He'll be making bets about tomorrow night's viewership and whether CM Punk returns. That's what he does now. He makes weird prop bets. His life is basically uncut gems, but it's all bets about weird things that happen in a completely predetermined business. Follow me at Glenn Rubenstein. like, subscribe, and we'll be back next time on Gigantic Pop. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back here soon. Take care.